Thanks for letting us know.
And then, unfortunately, we have two of our students missing. And so Dallas is another one of the students that was part of this initiative. And she goes to Woodlands Middle High School and she's going into her sophomore year. And she's passionate about teen mental health because she believes every young person deserves support, understanding, and the tools to thrive during such a critical time in their lives.
Hi, I'm Vivian. I go to Edgemont Junior Senior High School. I'm going in the 10th grade there. I'm passionate about teens' mental health since learning how underacknowledged it is up until recent years. And I also became interested in mental health after learning how it can have effects on physical health as well. So,
And then Lauren is another one of our students that is not on the call, but she also goes to Woodlands and is also going into 10th grade. And she's passionate about mental health because it's an important part of a person's overall well-being. And she believes that promoting awareness and access to support, that way we can help individuals to take control of their mental well-being.
Hello, my name is Theodora. I go to London's Middle High School and I'm entering my senior year. And the reason why I'm passionate about mental health awareness is because I feel like teens aren't taken as seriously as they could be, and a lot of their struggles are overlooked due to their age and maturity. And I want to help change that.
Okay, so now we're just going to go over some brief information, which I will again turn over to Dia.
What is mental health, and how does mental health impact you specifically? Um, Definition of teen mental health. Teen mental health refers to the emotional, psychological, and social well-being of adolescents, typically between the ages of 10 and 19. It affects how teens think, feel, and act, as well as how they handle stress, relate to others, and make choices. Maintaining good mental health during this developmental stage is crucial as it lays the foundation of healthy adulthood.
Okay, and this is some information which will come up by our guest speaker who works for 988, but 988 is the suicide and crisis lifeline here in the US, and it offers free and confidential support 24/7 for anyone experiencing emotional distress, a mental health crisis, or suicidal thoughts. When you call or text 988, you're connected with a trained crisis counselor who will listen, provide support, and help you find resources. Launched in July of 2022. Whoa. 2022, 988 is a simple, easy to remember alternative to the longer National Suicide Prevention Lifeline number. And Vivian, yep.
I struggled to unmute myself there for a second. But Bella Pepe is currently a junior at George Washington University studying psychology on a pre-PA track. She is originally from Long Island, New York, and for the past year and a half, she's been volunteering with the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline as a crisis counselor for a center based in California. Being part of this work has truly shaped who she is. She views her work as an honor to support people through their hardest moments, and she's so grateful to be a part of a community who leads with compassion and care.
Okay, and so I will stop sharing my screen, and Bella, if you're able to share your screen, if not,
Yes,
then
let
I can
me.
share your slides.
Okay, wait. Let's figure this out, how to do this.
I also wanted to let everyone know that this is being recorded for sharing purposes. There are some parents that wanted to make it tonight but weren't able to, so this is being recorded to be sent out to them.
Okay. Daphne, you may need to share.
No problem.
I think you're gonna have to just do it and then click for me if that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, let me just find it real.
How are we doing today, guys? Doing great.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Okay.
Okay. Um, Wait, Daphne, do you want to do it this way or do you want to present it like
It was sent to you sent it to me as a PDF. So right, right.
right, so I did that. Right. Okay, so can you just zoom in and then just like scroll down that way it's a little bit cleaner. Sorry, guys. Okay, cool. Okay. Um, Let me get adjusted here. So, like all of my lovely friends have introduced me, my name is Bella. I have been volunteering with the suicide hotline for about a year and a half now, so I've been there for quite some time. And I have gathered some valuable knowledge about how to, support teens in such a crucial time just in the world. And I'm excited to show it with you guys if you want to scroll, Daph. Okay, just a little bit about me before I go on. Like Vivian was saying, I go to the George Washington University. I'm studying psychological and brain sciences. I am on a pre-PA track, and that kind of happened really late into my college career. So that was very new. I have been at the suicide hotline for about a year and a half now. I've taken over 300 calls. So if you can imagine, I'm doing 4 hours a week and I'm taking that many calls. So it's pretty busy. And I started volunteering honestly for a plethora of reasons. I think the main one that kind of drove me was that, a lot of people obviously struggle with mental health, and especially those around me. And I grew up, in a time where it was misunderstood and still is misunderstood. And I wanted to understand how to support the people that I love a little bit better. And honestly, I think going to school in DC also made me like very like hyper aware of, just my surroundings and how people are mentally. And I think that that kind of only pushed me to do it more. And then I just a little note, because this is very important, that I am not a licensed clinical professional. I do not have a degree. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a psychiatrist. There is nothing to my name besides a volunteer. And then this presentation is only for educational purposes and based on my experience. So don't take anything and make it like medical advice. Like, don't quote me. I swear that, I'm not a licensed professional, but I do want to share what I know with you guys. Okay, so I just wanted to start off with a little bit of statistics just to help people understand a little bit about what's going on. This was taken from 2024. The first one is 45% of LGBTQ plus students seriously consider suicide. I put that one first because I just wanted to show how drastic that number is for people in that community. And then a lot of people that call the hotline aren't actually thinking about killing themselves because they are a part of this community. They're thinking about it because of the societal pressures that they face every single day. And it's very important to advocate for this group of people that don't seek the support that they need. The second statistics is that 42% of students felt persistently sad or hopeless. So this statistics was taken from like high school students only. And I think and I'll get into it a little bit later about how there's like a misconception with these like this now generation of person and how most teens are kind of just like angst and depressed and like emo and it's kind of their thing. When in reality it's a real documented number that most people, especially students, feel sad and hopeless. And then the last statistics is that 16% of students reported making a suicide plan in the past year. And then we'll talk a little bit more about this, why that number is so important. But yeah, I mean, honestly, just to get it out of the way very quickly, when we talk about suicide, it's such a taboo topic. Honestly, like when I talk about it with anyone, I think that it still makes their hair on their arms kind of spike up. It's uncomfortable to talk about. No one wants to talk about suicide. But the key to talking about stuff like this is to be extremely direct with it and to talk about it how it is, because that's how you break the stigma and it become less taboo over time. So I hope this presentation shows a little bit and shines some light on why it's so important to just talk about things exactly how they are, so we can educate people a little bit better. You can scroll left. Okay, so Over my year and a half, I've seen some common crisis patterns within teenagers. The first one being many teens feel unable to talk to their parents. This is super, super common, and I think that everyone here has probably dealt with some like way of some variety of this is that it's very difficult to talk to your support system because you're afraid that they're going to judge you or you're afraid that they're going to punish you. And oftentimes we have teens call and say, I want to tell my mom, but I'm afraid that she's going to get me in trouble. So it's very important to shine light on the fact that teens are scared to talk about it because it's scary. No one wants to go up to a parent and say, hey, I want to kill myself and that's just what I want to do. It's no one wants to talk about that. The second pattern I see is academic burnout, especially being in a center in California. So the way 988 works is that you're based in these centers in certain states, and then you only get calls from the surrounding area. So I think the place in California, I don't know how many zip codes we get, but it's only the surrounding area of California. Sometimes we'll get like Arizona randomly, but oftentimes you have to have a California zip code or California like area code with your phone um, to get like into that center in California. I guess the point of this is that California, their high schools are very competitive, and I hear a lot of stories about people having just general anxiety about, the future in college, but not wanting to be here anymore because high school is so stressful and because of, the people around them kind of putting this high expectation on them, expecting them to do all these things that they just don't have the capacity to do. And then the third one is less autonomy over their lives. Teenagers, especially now, there's more noise in the world than there once was, which means that teens have a lot to pick from. And oftentimes, when you're in the restraints of like being in high school and being in a schedule and kind of your opinions being formed of wherever you live, and it's very hard to break apart from that. And you have to wake up every day and go to school. You have to do chores. You have to do this, that, and the third. And it can feel very difficult for teens to kind of feel like independent in any way, and that can be really distressing for them. Another pattern is just new challenges and, not knowing how to cope with them. I think we see a lot of this with kids that are going to college for the first time and having to go through that college process. It's very distressing and it's very humbling. And a lot of kids don't know how to deal with it because they don't have the tools in their toolbox to deal with it, which is very understandable. And then the last one is social media pressure, which is objectively probably the biggest pattern that I see in teens is pressures from, whether that be people or just random celebrities. We are constantly, constantly being fed new media, and the cycle just continues and continues and continues. And it's very hard to separate yourself from this big, ocean of people and constantly comparing everything about yourself to another person. So that often can again be very distressing for teens. And then the next thing, Daph, you can scroll. Sorry. The next thing I want to talk about is some common misconceptions just about suicide because I think it's important to make it very clear what exactly, is actually going on. The first one is that depression equals suicide. This is not always true. You can have depression and you can not want to kill yourself, but you also could have depression and want to kill yourself. Also, you'll hear me refer to suicide as kill yourself instead of commit suicide. That's something that we were taught very early on is you don't ever want to use the word commit suicide, or you don't want to tell someone, are you going to commit suicide? When you say the word commit, it makes the person on the receiving end feel like they're committing a crime. So oftentimes that can just close them off more and more and more, and they're less likely to open up in the future. So you're going to hear me say kill yourself, which is very blunt, but it is better than saying commit suicide, just again for the reason of it feeling like a crime or you're doing something wrong. So like I was saying, not all teens have depression. Sorry, not all teens with depression have suicidal thoughts. Many of them feel sadness and fatigue and hopelessness without being suicidal, and then you also could be suicidal. So it's not necessarily they're not they're exclusive of one another. The next one I put in here because we have a lot of callers who are third party callers, which means there's a parent or a friend or an aunt or a grandma or a guardian messaging us or calling us talking about their 13, and we see this all the time. I would say that I get more third party calls about teens and active suicides than I do from an actual teen. So I put this in here because sometimes I have parents call and they'll be on the phone and they're like, I just don't understand why so and so wants to kill themselves. Like they have a lot of friends, so they're fine. And this is a huge, huge misconception. I think we're not just seeing it today. We've been seeing it for the whole time. It's always been that way. A teen can be very socially active and still feel extremely alone. And, having a lot of friends doesn't always equal emotional support. Again, when we're talking to people on the hotline, we really want to identify what their support system is very quickly. So if we have a parent saying they have a lot of friends, they're fine. Maybe that's something to look into and say, they have a lot of friends. That's a dinger. Maybe that's like a buffer for them and they do have a support system. But that also could mean that they're just trying to distract themselves or they're not genuine friends and they don't have authentic connections with them. So it is something worth exploring. But it is not true. I start this one because this is like the most common phrase I hear all the time, and it's just a phase. So I think this one's tricky because sometimes you can say it's just a phase, and it's not that it is just a phase, it's just that there's external factors that the teen is dealing with that could really just be a phase. But to limit them to that is very, very harmful. And by saying things like that, it oftentimes sends teens deeper and deeper, deeper into whatever they're in rather than, uplifting them and trying to show them that you are a support system. So that phrase is generally very, very harmful, just to say to actually anyone, it's not just teens. And then the next one is teens who talk about suicide just want attention. So I see this a lot from parents, but I actually see this a lot from other teens. Sometimes we have teens call about other teens and they're like, so and so just keeps talking about wanting to kill herself. And I just like don't, she just is doing it for attention. Like I see her doing all these things and it's just for attention. While that can be true, it oftentimes is a cry for help, and sometimes it's really difficult to express the way you feel. I mean, even now talking about suicide, it's very difficult to, limit it to one interaction or another interaction. There's many different forms that it takes. But, if you were to say to someone, you're just doing this for attention, again, like the first one, that oftentimes will just send them deeper into whatever they're struggling with. So now we're going on what to kind of do if you think maybe your teen is suicidal. The first thing is to look for signs. So the best way that I would say this is what is your teen's normal? So if you have a teenager that normally shows a lot of rage and it's kind of been that way their whole life, that wouldn't really be a warning sign. That would just kind of be something that they struggle with, or something that's a part of their personality. But if you see a teen randomly starting to show a lot of rage, that can kind of be a warning that goes off in your head of, maybe something's wrong. Talking about wanting to die is obviously a big one. That can be kind of secretly being like, oh, I just wish I wasn't here, or things don't feel the same things don't feel the same that they used to, and I wish I could go back, and I don't want to be on this earth anymore. Things like that. That's all insinuating that you don't want to be here anymore. And although a lot of people say it as a joke, it should be taken seriously. Drug and alcohol abuse. This is not just limited to suicide. Like if someone was engaging in drugs and alcohol, I don't think that I would immediately assume that they are suicidal. But it again is something that if it's abnormal for your child or abnormal for like your friends, of course, because I know we have a lot of teens on here. So like if you have a friend that's randomly starting to do a bunch of drugs and drink a bunch of alcohol, like oftentimes they are filling a void. And you're going to see more patterns start to follow that. But that is something that, maybe a red flag and something that you can talk to them about. And then sleeping too much or too little. This is also goes hand in hand with depression. And like the other side, you don't, just because you're depressed doesn't mean you're suicidal, but sometimes it does. And it takes some exploring. And then feeling hopeless or having no purpose. The best way that this manifests, or kind of not the best way, but the most common way I hear is kind of a teen being like, Well, I mean, college isn't really going to matter. I don't even know if I'm going to make it. Or it doesn't matter what 10 years looks like because I don't know if I'm going to be here in 10 years. You know, showing behaviors like that and saying things like that obviously should be a red flag for anyone, no matter the age. And when you have these signs, it's good to ask questions. I mean, being curious is really your superpower when you're on the receiving end of something like this. There is direct questions like you can ask. For example, do you have a plan to hurt yourself? Have you ever attempted suicide in the past? And then have you ever thought about a way you would do it? So I know those are kind of all over the place, but do you have a plan to hurt yourself? If they say yes, they are more likely to go through with that plan than not. Suicide can be broken down into two categories, desire and intent. So, suicidal desire, I would even go so far to say all of us has probably thought it. You're walking down the street and a bunch of cars coming, and the thought pops in your head of, maybe I should just jump in front of these cars. Or you got a really bad test grade and you're just so frustrated that you just think to yourself, like, I wish I wasn't here. That's suicidal desire. It is a thought your mind is meant to think. The thought came in. It's not a bad thought. It just came in, and there's nothing that you can do to control it. Suicidal intent is another thing. That's when you have a plan and you have a means and you have a timeline and you know exactly how you're going to do it and where you're going to leave things. And that's a completely different ballgame. That's when we're talking about serious, imminent danger rather than just a passing thought. And I'm not saying that those passing, I guess you can call them intrusive thoughts, shouldn't be taken seriously. But again, oftentimes most human beings have that thought. We just don't talk about it because suicide is not something that people feel comfortable talking about. And then why it's important to ask, have you ever attempted suicide before? When I started the hotlines, I was always so confused as to why this was relevant. But if they've attempted suicide in the past, they are far more likely to try it again. Um, because if you try it once and you fail, oftentimes you are presented with either I'm so glad it didn't work, or I'm so mad it didn't work. And then you just feel with rage and you kind of feel like a failure and you just want to try again. So it is very, very, very important to ask someone if they have attempted suicide in the past, if you think that they may be suicidal. You can scroll back. Okay. So this is how parents can approach difficult conversations. Obviously, this is just talking about like suicide or depression, or just honestly wanting to know something about your child um, in regards to their mental health. I think this is kind of a good, steps to follow. The first one is to prepare yourself emotionally. Everyone that I talk to on the hotline and I tell parents, like, make sure you're in a good space, they kind of disregard this. If you're not regulated, you can't have a conversation with someone who you think is dysregulated. You need to find out what is your ground zero. How can I ground myself before I can have this conversation? Because it is going to trigger you no matter what you do. So whether that be taking a few breaths or going to have a really nice meal or, just doing something for yourself before you have that conversation, it oftentimes can just lead to a better outcome, and also you're calmer or you're more yourself than you would be if you were triggered or feeling emotionally distressed. Which is not to say that this is not an emotionally distressing thing to ask your child. It is very, very, very difficult, but it's very important to be approaching it in, a common collective like view rather than kind of being all over the place. The second thing is to choose the right moment. Never, ever, 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 ever ask your child if they are suicidal when you guys are having a complete argument about something different. This can feel like maybe the thing that you guys are arguing about isn't their fault. I mean, sorry, is their fault, and it's kind of like you deflecting it. And I just know that a lot of teens, when and I've heard when they're having a conversation or a fight with their parents, and their parent says, well, are you depressed? Like, do I need to bring you to therapy? What are you like doing something to yourself? That can put them on defense because you're not approaching that conversation at ground zero, and you're going to put the teen on defense, and you're going to want to also fight your case. So it can be very emotionally distressing for both parties. So choose a moment that's kind of calm, maybe when they're sitting down, not doing much, or you just had a good dinner, like I was saying, or you did something where you know that their teen is at what you think of their normal, their ground zero. And then step three would be to open the conversation gently. Again, what's your normal? Would you go up to your teen and say, are you gonna kill yourself? Most parents wouldn't do that. So figure out a way to kind of maneuver yourself in there and approach gently because that's how you're gonna, again, guarantee or not guarantee or help yourself in the future that your teen may open up again. Step four is to listen without interrupting. So I don't know if it was 9 and 8 that gave me this phrase or if it was just like life experience, but I've kind of always done this when someone is talking about something that is emotionally distressing for them. You have two ears and one mouth for a reason. Listen more than you're speaking. Let them do the speaking. This is not your time to fill in the blanks and assume that you know what they're going through because, again, most times you have no idea what they're going through. And then the next step would be to validate their feelings. I'm going to skip this one and go back to it later because I have a whole slide on that. But it's very important to make sure that you understand where they're coming from, even if you don't know why they're feeling the way that they're feeling. And then step six would be to avoid judgment or quick fixes. The most common quick fix that I hear from teens would be like, oh, do you want money? Or do you want like, can I get you like coffee? Like, what can I do for you? And although that may like be a very like, a serotonin booster in the moment, that's a quick fix. And um, again, is not a productive thing to say to someone when they're trying to open up about something that's, vulnerable to them. Step seven would be to offer support and not pressure. This one's hard, and I actually, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to word this. When parents say that they want their child to get help, I'm so on their side because I know how difficult it can be to, have someone that you love go through that. But if you're pressuring them and saying you're going to therapy or you're going to see a psychiatrist, again, it's gonna make that teen feel defensive and push back and kind of go back to whatever patterns that they were doing because they don't feel supported. And then step eight is to keep the door open. So, whatever that looks like for you, oh, hey, maybe, we can talk about this again if you want, or if you ever feel like this, like, you can talk to me, saying phrases like that where you know that they're not in trouble, or they know that they're not in trouble and they're not going to be punished, and that they are supported and they are cared for. Um, and again, on the side, it says lead with curiosity. You don't know what they're going through, only what they choose to tell you. So most of the times when I'm on a call, or actually all the time, um, I'm only getting half of the story. So I could have someone on the phone with me saying that they just got into a huge fight with their mom. How do I know if mom or the kid's at fault? I don't know who's at fault. I know what they're choosing to tell me, and I know how to support them in that time. It's not my responsibility to figure out what's going on. And the same goes for a parent. It's not your responsibility to dig and to dig and to dig and see what's going on in your teen's life that may made them be the way that they are. It's kind of really difficult to do that, and I totally understand that, but I think it's more productive to approach it with like, whatever you want to tell me, I'm here to listen, and that's okay. And if you don't want to tell me everything, that's okay. That is going to make them want to open up again in the future. And again, I keep saying open up again in the future so many times, but it's so, so important because these support systems are oftentimes what makes someone kill themselves or not kill themselves. Truly, like when you have a support system, it is the last thing that you think of. So it's very important to keep yourself open in that way. You can scroll down. And then here are some tools for parents. So on the hotline, we do something called coaching when a parent calls. And again, we have a lot of parents call kind of being like, I don't know what to do. I feel so hopeless and I want to help them. And obviously, we don't know the situation, but we can tell them what we know. So, the biggest tool that I use, and I use this in my daily life, is validation. We've all heard of it. Teens often feel dismissed, overreactive, or too emotional. And when their emotions are validated, they feel seen and heard. So, instead of saying things like, why would you feel like that? Like if someone came up to you and they were like, I feel ugly, and you said, why would you feel like that? Like you're beautiful. That's not validating their thought, and it can be really harmful for that teen. So my top three phrases that I use all the time is, it makes sense that you'd feel that way. Again, when someone's telling me how they feel, it's not my responsibility to judge. And I'll be so straight with you guys. I have had some callers call when you just have to take a step back and be like, whoa, like this person is calling and this person has done like X, Y, and Z, and I can't believe that I have to tell them it makes sense that you feel that way. But the truth is you have no idea what they're going through. You have no idea what led them to the point that they're at. So you have to support those people. And I oftentimes say it makes sense that you feel that way because that makes someone feel heard and it makes them feel seen as they should. They should feel that. The next one I use is can't imagine how hard that must be. I think a lot of people use this without knowing that they're using it. You know, if you hear your friend goes through a hard time, it's like, I can't even imagine how hard that would be for you. Um, Again, you never want to minimize an issue for someone, and especially with teens, you know, I think you hear parents say a lot, or I hear parents say a lot, like it just feels like the world's coming crashing down on them and they like this is all the world is to them. Well, it is. You know, when you're 15, 16, that's the truth of it. There is no, you all you know is like school and then whatever emotions you're feeling in response to external factors. So it's important to just try to meet them where they're at. And like, I can't imagine how you would feel that way. Even if you said to yourself, like, I am having X, Y, and Z in my life, and I'm older, and I can't believe that they just can't reason with it. Well, they don't have your life experiences, and you don't have theirs. So it's important to meet them where they are. And the third one is you're not overreacting. This really matters to you. Again, that kind of goes back to the second point of it's really important to make sure you're not minimizing a teen's issue because, again, it could make them feel like they don't want to open up in the future again. And then emotion labeling, which again, I use a lot in my daily life. It's the process of identifying and naming the emotions you're feeling. So, for example, it sounds like you're feeling sad. I know that is so dry as it is, and it's kind of like, well, obviously you're feeling sad, but when you complicate it, it can kind of almost make the teen feel like maybe I should feel that way. So, for example, if someone says, I feel off, you can label that emotion to how you think that you would feel if you were in their position. So, if someone said, I feel off, I could say, it sounds like you must feel very overwhelmed right now with that feeling. Like, that's how I would feel if I was in their position. If they correct you, then let them because it's opening the door for the two of you to have a very honest conversation. And we can use vague feelings and label them, and this can try to understand what they are feeling, like I was saying before. And again, it's important to just try to understand how they're feeling, even though in reality, we're never going to understand why someone is feeling a certain way or why something matters to a person because we don't have their life experiences. And it's not necessarily our job to understand exactly why we're feeling that way, but how can we support them? Um, I think you can scroll that. So here are some do's and don'ts of when you're having a conversation. Again, everything that I'm saying is just like things that I've heard from parents or advice I've given to parents on the hotline, and things that I've heard from teens, especially. So the first one is do listen more than you talk. I know that I mentioned this before, but it's very important. It's also how you get more information. I had this really big issue for like I think 9 months that I was doing, I started and then 9 months in. I had supervisors telling me I was doing the same thing and I couldn't stop doing it. And it's when I was asking a question, I would give them a multiple choice. So I would say, like, oh, so do you feel sad, angry, mad, or happy? And then it limits the caller to like four emotions. And they're like, wait, but I don't feel any of those. I feel like a different one. So I kind of had to break that habit. It was really, really difficult because, again, I was working with what I thought that they may feel. And it's more valuable just for them to tell you whatever they're feeling. But that doesn't eliminate emotion labeling. If someone were to say, like, I feel sad, or not, I feel sad, that is an emotion. If someone were to say, like, I'm just so stressed with school. Everything is going this, that, and the third. You could say, I feel, it sounds like you're feeling overwhelmed as a response, which is not a negative response in any way to emotion label what someone may be feeling. And the next one is do reassure their feelings. That kind of goes back to the validation thing. Again, meeting them where they are. And even if you don't understand what they're going through, at least try to support them. And I keep saying that so often, so many times during this presentation, because it's just taken for granted. You're never going to understand, and we're never going to understand what, someone else may be going through. So it works both ways. And then the next one is do remind them that you are there to support them. Like I was saying, so there was a caller This wasn't my call. This was someone else's call, but there was a call that happened where there was a mom and she had said, I don't want to be here anymore. I've tried everything. And she had a plan and she had the means in front of her. She knew exactly what she was going to do and she had a timeline. And she said, I'm going to hang up the phone and I'm going to do it right after I hang up the phone with the counselor that was on. I know the counselor is like doing everything that they're doing. Like, what can I do to stop this? Trying to work with them. And the mom said, like, there's nothing that you can say right now that's going to make me not die after this. And it was very, very difficult. Obviously, it's extremely high risk call for the counselor. And the counselor said something that I don't even think that we're necessarily taught to say, but she said, you know, and again, trigger warning, this is obviously very graphic. She had said, who's gonna find your body? And the mom stopped for a second and was like, My daughter." And she had called back the hotline like 7 years later and she was still alive because of just being reminded that her daughter exists. And those support systems, or at the hotline, we call them buffers, those are sometimes the reason that someone doesn't go over the edge or someone doesn't take the pills or, doesn't do X, Y, and Z. It's very, 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 very important to make it known that you are there to support your child, not judge them. Um, so yeah, I'm a big fan of that one. And I always tell parents, if there's anything that you get from the conversation with me, just tell them that you support them. And then the don'ts is don't try to minimize their problems, like I was saying before. It's you don't ever want to try to make their problems feel smaller or compare them to something that you might have gone through because it's not going to help in the moment, even though, they may look back on it and it's like, oh, I really was kind of I really was kind of making the feeling a little bit bigger, but that's how they felt in the moment, and there's not much that you can do. The next one, I put in here because I would say 85% of the calls that I get tie back to someone's faith, in terms of like parents and teens. And I've heard a lot of teens say, like, I wouldn't kill myself because it's a sin. And I don't want to do it because it's a sin and I'll go to hell. And although I think it's very important to be strong in your faith, and if that is what you're being taught, then that's your faith and no one can tell you wrong. But if you have a child that may be resistant to maybe resistant to religion, or you have a child that's really, really into religion, and you tell them, I just it's sin. If you commit suicide, if you kill yourself, it's a sin. And you're gonna go to hell. Oftentimes that teen can do one of two things. They're either going to respond to that well and not hurt themselves, but then just fall into a deep, deep cycle with religion of thinking that everything is a sin if they don't follow, um, whatever faith that they're following. And again, I'm only saying that not because that's my opinion, but because that is exactly what people tell me. Um, or they're going to go forward with it because they don't feel that the support from directly from their parent, and that can feel really difficult. I think faith is a really big thing in suicide because it can be very helpful. It is a support system for a lot of teenagers. It's a support system for a lot of parents and older. I have so many older people call me and say that's like the one reason that they won't hurt themselves. And if that's what's going to keep you and that's what is one of your buffers, your faith, it is very important to lean into that. However, you don't want to push it onto someone that you think may not be responsive to it, especially with a teen. And then the last one is don't try to convince them that the issues aren't serious. This goes back to everything that I was saying. Um, it's very important to, you know, I I think that you can have some element of like, okay, so you want to kill yourself over a math test. Let's talk about how rational that is. But to say directly like this isn't serious or like this isn't as big as you're making it can be super harmful because it is that serious. It is as big as they're making it because again, we all feel things on a spectrum of emotions and you can't quantify how someone's feeling and then, label it as like unserious if it's very serious to them. So, those are my do's and my don'ts. I think you can flip. And then lastly, I wanted to finish with some resources. So, um, here, the first one is Teen Line. So Teen Line is a California um, run line, and basically it is 13. Is it 13? I think it's 14. It's 14 to 18-year-olds. Whenever you get into high school, so I think 14 or 15. It's high school students that run this line. And basically you can call and it's exactly like 988. However, it's run by teens. And a lot of people really like it because you're not talking to someone who's older, or you're not talking to someone who you think may not understand what you're struggling with, but you're talking to someone who's maybe in your class or maybe, in a surrounding area. So it's very, very, very helpful. The only thing with Teen Line is that since we're on the East Coast, and I should have added this into the presentation. Since we're on the East Coast, Teen Line is only running from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Pacific time. So it's a 3-hour jump? Yeah, so I think it's 9 for us is when it starts, which is very late. But oftentimes teens call the hotline a little bit later than earlier, because that's when it seems like most start to feel the most distress is at night. And then there's some other resources here. I'm trying to think of the organ line is very good. For all of the for anyone that is a part of the LGBTQ community, you can't call 988 and press 1 anymore for the Trevor line, but you can call the Trevor line directly. So for people that don't know, the Trevor line is a crisis hotline that is directed for people that are a part of the LGBTQ plus community. And unfortunately, it due to jurisdiction, it no longer exists a part of 988. It is a separate entity. So you have to call them directly. And if you were to ever call 988, just so you know, you're going to be prompted with a few, like, it says, like, please click here if you're blah, blah, blah. And, if you're a veteran, there's a veterans line that you can click and it's very useful. But oftentimes there isn't a long wait for 988. So if you call, you should be helped right away, and supported. But I would say, for parents, seriously, seriously, like, give Teen Line for teens here. If you know anyone, like, give Teen Line. It is an amazing resource. And not everyone knows about it, especially we don't know about it here because we're on the East Coast and I only know about it because it's in California. But it's an amazing resource to have. And there are other resources that I have that I never added because they're not specific to teens. But if anyone wants to know what other random ones are, I think I have a few more. But and then yeah, and 988 is of course a resource that you can use. And just a little heads up, parents, you can always call for your teen. Teens, you can call for another teen. Teens, you can call for your parents. Anyone can call for whoever they want to call. And it is a good way to show that you care. And I always feel very warm when a parent calls for their teen because it's truly like the biggest act of support. It's like, I don't know what to do and I want to support my child and I don't know how to do it. So please, like, give me anything. And it really shows, that a lot of these parents, from my knowledge, feel better after because they know some tools to help with their, whatever their teen is struggling with. And I'm trying to think if I have anything else to add. I think that's it. You can scroll, Daphne. And then if anyone has any questions, you can feel free to ask. I, of course, would love to answer any, but if not, that's also okay. And thank you guys so much for having me and listening to me for 30 minutes. I really appreciate it. I was very nervous to do this. So Daphne, thank you for asking me. And I hope that it was useful in some capacity and that people learned something. So, yep.
Yes, before we transition to questions, I do just want to take a minute to thank Bella for taking some time out of her day to come and talk to us today. Yes. Um, I just want to thank Bella because not only was that informative, but it was incredibly detailed, and I just think such a helpful resource to hear from someone who hears things like this directly. I think so many times, like Bella mentioned, this is so taboo where we think it won't affect us until it does. And so it's so important to know that there are resources in place. And so, yeah, but I do want to turn this over if there's any questions. Please feel free to ask. This is such a safe space. So parents, if you have questions, teens, if you have questions, please feel free to ask and Bella will answer to the best of her knowledge.
So there's one comment in the chat, but so I'll answer this, and then if anyone has anything else, you can always add in the chat or just like unmute and fully interrupt me. Like it's really I don't care. Is it better for a friend to call 988 for a friend or go to a school counselor? This is a great question, and this actually is something that I probably should have mentioned. So 988 is immediate crisis counseling. So what 988 was originally made for is people that are in active suicides or in some capacity of risk, whether that be hey, I kind of don't want to be here. I think I'm going to kill myself in a week. All the way up to, hey, I'm in the middle of it. Stop me. I'm in the middle of it right now. So 988 is meant for short-term, immediate help. How can we get you out of crisis and de-escalate you as quickly as possible? And then support you from there, whether that be, trying to figure out a safety plan for you or trying to figure out, how to support you in the short term for the rest of the day or for the rest of the week. But again, in no way is anyone on 988 a therapist or acting as a clinician. That's a very important distinction to make. So my best advice would be is if your friend has been talking about suicide, I think it is a very good thing to go to the school counselor and maybe bring that to her attention. But what I always say to I always say this to parents because it's really hard. 988 is not allowed to call the person directly. So I've had parents call and be like, "Can you call my teen? Like they're really struggling." Due to HIPAA, we're not allowed to break that third party, so we can't call the teen directly. We also can't call emergency services or do much unless there's an active suicide happening. So if your friend has talked about suicide or talked about maybe wanting to not be here anymore, it is really, really helpful to say, "Hey, here's a number that I think that you should call," rather than calling it yourself and kind of explaining, the situation because there's not much that that counselor is going to be able to do besides support you, yourself, the caller, and your friend in the time. So I think, school counselor is more like longevity of whatever's going on, and then crisis counselor or 988, I'm sorry, is like short-term care. Hopefully that helped.
Yeah, so I do have a question too. Um,
Mhm.
uh, so is there any like specific or like different advice you would give to like someone when it's like a friend who needs it? Is there any like different advice you should give to them, or should you just follow like the same types of advice, like it sounds like you're feeling sad and like that type of
From
thing?
like a teen to a teen.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, again, it differs. If you have like a 25-year-old talking to another 25-year-old about suicide, it's going to look very different from like a 16-year-old talking to a 16-year-old, and that comes to like down to autonomy. So I think following the similar steps that I have put is probably the best bet. The only difference is you now as a friend have to deal with the extra barrier of how do I get someone of authority, someone, parental guardian to know about this? And that is something that we hear about all the time. Like a teen calling and be like, I don't want to get my friend in trouble, but she keeps talking about wanting to kill herself. Like, what am I supposed to do? It is very situational depend. Like it differs from whatever is going on with the person. My best advice would always be it is better to speak than to never say anything. Like truly from the bottom of my heart, you have people who say like if I tell you I want to kill myself and you tell anyone, you are at fault for my death. If someone looked you in the face and said I'm going to kill myself because you just tried to get me help, you're not at fault. It is better to do more than to not do anything. And no matter how that looks, again, it's like dependent on like if you have a friend that has a really bad home life, maybe it's not as ideal to go directly to the parents and say she wants to kill herself because that could look pretty different, to the parents and that could cause their own issues rather than like someone that may have a good home life and going to their parents and knowing that that parent's going to be a support system for them. So like I said, it's kind of dependent, but I would say generally you can follow a similar format from what I had given. That was a good question.
Cool, thank you.
Both of my experience have been.
I have a question. What advice would you suggest that I could give a friend if I want to help them through a tough time?
That's a good question. Like suicidal or just in general?
Just in general, with like their health.
Yeah, I think obviously there's a lot that you can say. The best thing that I that I always, and I do this in my real life, is that what they're going through, you don't necessarily know. So focusing on kind of like emotion labeling, like what you think they may be going through. So for example, if someone were to come to me and been like, I am so stressed for college applications. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go. Where am I going to be in 10 years? Like, how am I going to do this? Rather than giving them solutions because you as a friend don't have those solutions because no one has those solutions. Supporting them in that in the moment would be, you know, this is very obviously very distressing for you and very overwhelming. Like, how can we make you feel more comfortable right now? Like, what can we do? And some of my most loveliest friends that I have, instead of giving me like advice, what they'll do is say to me, what can I do right now to help you? And that sentence, no matter at what stage of my life I've been at, has always felt the most validating of like, what can I do right now to help you? Because I know that the person that I'm talking to, my friend, doesn't know exactly what I'm going through, but the fact that they're willing to like sacrifice that time makes me feel seen, and therefore I'm going to feel a little bit de-escalated. So I think it's a good question to ask, like, how exactly do you support that person? Because honestly, sometimes you don't know. I've had people growing up that I have had no idea how to support them. I've had no idea how to even navigate their situation, which is normal because you're also learning and you're not supposed to know all of these things, but use the tools that you have. You know how to, maybe make your friend feel better. And you know, like, oh, maybe she loves this bag of chips. Maybe she loves going to the park or like loves doing this, that, and the third. And showing up in the ways that you know is more valuable than trying to stretch and find new ways to help this person. When in that instance, maybe it's not so bad to stray from what you know and to kind of just keep in that zone because it oftentimes can make the person feel really comforted rather than like you're trying to fix them. Because that's another distinction that I hear a lot of people on the hotline make is like, I don't want to be fixed. I just want to talk about it. So again, like kind of listening and rather than trying to fix them, just saying exactly what you think. Like, hey, obviously you're going through a really hard time. Like, let's go try and get maybe some food because maybe that's going to be the best for you. And then oftentimes they'll open up over time and you'll get a better grasp of the situation. But I think, showing up in the way that you know how to show up is the best way to support them.
All right, thank you. Also, like, I don't know if you went over it already because I joined a little late, but what's the most common issue that you hear?
In teens,
Yeah.
the most common issue that I hear is probably like social media pressures. I mean, especially in this day, but it's dependent on what community we're looking at. So sometimes in teens from like, on the younger side, you may see a different trend than someone on the older side. And I think it just depends. But I would say social media is like it is that phone. It's always going to be the phone that's the issue. Like I fear it is the phone, and there is no way to like sugarcoat it. It's always going to cause a lot of issues, especially now when a lot of people are so uneducated about how to have safe social media parameters and how to navigate that on their own. So I would say social media, and I would also probably say like, I don't know, older people in high school is it's always academic or future and feeling like, lost and not knowing what to do, which is valid because we've all been there.
Thank you so much.
Okay, so I actually have a couple questions. Do you think that like majority of the calls that you get are because of home life problems?
It's a great question. Unfortunately, yeah, I would say even in adults, I would go so far to say that when 95% of the calls that we're getting, I'm speaking of adults now just to show you, 95% of the calls that I'm getting from adults boils down to one thing, and it's always financial issues. Always, always, always. With teens, it always boils down to one thing usually. Well, I can't leave my room, or mom doesn't get it, dad doesn't get it. I don't feel loved in that way. And sometimes you'll get the golden, I feel so supported and I feel so supported here and I don't know why I'm feeling this way. And those are also difficult calls, but I would say home life is a big thing because home life is majority of what a teen like has it in some capacity. I mean, you come home to it and you're surrounded by those people and that's your support system. So if you don't have that support system, it's gonna, take a toll. But I would say that.
Also, like, do you think that
I actually have a question. So your teen has gone to the parents for emotional support, but the parents like haven't given to him, like they're dismissive of teens on mental health struggles. What should that teen do?
So I missed the first part. I don't know if it's my Wi-Fi or yours, but I think that you said something about a parent being dismissive towards a teen.
Yeah, I said if a parent is dismissive of a teen's mental health struggles.
Yeah. So we see that a lot. I mean, again, like I would even say that's like a pretty reoccurring theme. And oftentimes you get thrown with the line of, oh, you're just like Gen Z. I don't know. What are you guys Gen Z? What are you guys? Okay, yeah. It's like, oh, you're just Gen Z. Oh my God, you're just like, you're so that era that like, And my best way to combat with that is I always tell teens this. I'm like, listen, your mom and dad were definitely feeling down in the dumps when they were 15. They had different struggles, but they were feeling sad. They might even have been depressed. They might even have been suicidal, but they didn't have any way to label it. Just because we have labels doesn't mean that it's any more present. We just have labels now, and it's breaking the stigma for people to come out and talk about it more. So it's valid that you're saying that, but it's also not valid, but it's understandable from the parents' side when they didn't necessarily have those tools or know how to label things. And it's no one's fault. I think the best way to do that, because it's kind of like a game of tennis, like it's like you as a teen are like, oh, like I feel this way, and they're like, no, you don't. Like go eat some food. And unfortunately, that is again a lot of reasons that teens do kill themselves is because they're dismissed. And I think the best way to do that is, oh God, it's so tricky because I don't even necessarily know how like what I would say because it's just dependent. I think something always clicks for the parent of like what is going to make them what's going to set them over and really think that there's something, going on with their teen. And I would say if distancing yourself works or being very persistent works, I think that that's also very useful. But again, I can't really speak on this because I know people and I've heard people who are now 25 or 30 and their parents still don't think that their clinical diagnosed mental disorder is real. Um, so I wish I had better advice. I wish I had a way that I can help you with that, but I always struggle when people call and tell me that because you can't change anyone's opinion. And oftentimes we see teens like hurt themselves or harm themselves, and then that's what sets over their parent, and they start to think like, oh, maybe something's actually wrong. Um, and I would say that, being persistent and truly showing in the way that you can that something's going on is the best way that you can advocate for yourself.
Okay. I do just want to pause questions from the students for a second because I believe that someone put a comment and a question in the chat.
Okay. This is a good question. If a teen tells a friend that they're having suicidal thoughts, but they don't want to tell anyone, what should you do? Um, Again, this is situational, and this kind of comes, in my opinion, this comes down to like morals, if that makes sense. So if someone were to say that they're suicidal and they're like, but please don't tell my mom, please don't tell my dad, you now have that knowledge. And I will make this very clear to all of you that even if they kill themselves and you never told anybody, it is not your fault. It is not your fault. No one is responsible to be carrying that emotional baggage with them. My best advice and what I always tell parents is to somehow find a way to give them a resource. If you don't want to tell anyone, if you don't want anyone to, you don't want to break like your friend code, find a way to give them a resource. Find a way to give them 988. Find a way to make maybe someone at school aware. Because again, I think it differs from like school to school, but sometimes if you tell a school counselor, and I know that this person was talking about how they've had bad experiences with authorities, but the feeling of being portrayed is just like protective gear on everyone's side. So I think that I would say find a way to give them a resource or find the way to again show up in the way that you can, but there isn't much that you can do besides like what do you as a person feel like you can do. If you want to carry this emotional baggage and that you feel like you have the capacity for that, that's one thing. But again, I would rather be hated by someone for the rest of their lives than them not have a life. So I would rather someone tell me that they've been betrayed. And to be completely upfront, that has happened before. I've spoken up about people when I was in high school, and they no longer talk to me anymore because I did say something, but they're still on this earth. And to me, that counts for something. So, I think it's dependent on, situation, but it's always better to tell someone if you genuinely think that they might hurt themselves, and also find a way to give them a resource, because they're both very valuable things to keep in mind.
And then Bella, I think that same person also put a comment in the chat if you want to respond to it.
Wait.
I can resend it. I can read it. Do you want me to read it out to you?
Yeah.
Both of my teen girls have had bad experiences talking with school authorities because their friends feel betrayed and tell them that things are made worse due to unsupportive parents.
Yeah, that's what I had just touched on that because I had saw. Again, oh God, it's so hard. It's so hard with stuff like parents, because I'm not necessarily very aware of like the jurisdiction of what school counselors can and can't do. I am pretty sure, I mean, all teachers are mandated reporters, and so I guess that does also apply to school counselors, and they do have to tell parents if you're under 18, which I do know. So let me read it one more time. Both my teens have bad experience with school. Yeah, okay. I again, this then comes down to like it's a home life thing, and there's only so much that you can do with the resources that you have. My best, what's the deal? What's the word I'm trying to look for? Because I would say like have them talk to the school authority a little bit, the school counselor like more, and try to get them to know their story, but then they feel betrayed by them. So it's also like a double-edged sword. Um, and that's very tricky to navigate also because you feel like you maybe are not doing as much as you can be doing, because now you feel like maybe this friend is betrayed, and then it's just going deeper and deeper into whatever they're feeling. But yeah, that is a tricky one. I don't necessarily have like a cookie cutter answer for that one. Um, because that just goes down to like again home life and how someone I would always say like if you have a friend that is supportive, if you have a friend whose family is very supportive and that may help that friend, taking them out more doesn't help, or being there for that friend doesn't help if you have the emotional capacity to deal with that. And that's something that you have to keep in mind. So, if that's something that they may be struggling with, they feel betrayed by their parents, they feel betrayed by their school authorities, trying to do what you can. But again, it's also not your job to fix anything. You can just show up in the way that you know how to show up and, at least try. But again, that situation is very tricky, and I do hear you.
I had another question if that's okay.
Of course.
Okay, so when a friend, if a friend, well, hypothetically, if a friend like went up, like texted me or something, and they were like talking about how like they were suicidal and they wanted to kill themselves, and I'm the person they trusted to tell because they don't trust their parents enough to do that, it
Mm.
like really stresses me out because I don't like being like responsible because it makes me feel like I'm responsible for their life, and if they do end up, God forbid, like killing themselves actually, then I'm like, what? So I was wondering if it was, sorry. Um, so I was wondering if it was better to like call a hotline of some sort to like get some advice to give them because you can't call them directly, or should I just try to respond of the best of my ability, and like hope it works and like kind of like support them because like it's like kind of scary to receive such like stuff because it also like makes me feel so
Yeah.
stressed out, like I'm
Yeah.
totally feeling
No,
responsible.
that's very valid, and I've been there. That comes down to boundaries, but that is a whole nother monster when you're talking about someone's life on the line. To make it very clear, and if anyone if anyone takes anything away from this presentation, I hope that you know that if someone tells you that they're suicidal and it's your fault if you don't get them help, you are not to blame. If someone tells you that they're going to kill themselves and if you don't do X, Y, and Z, it's your fault. It's not your fault. It is very, very, very hard to separate the two, but it is never, ever, ever your fault when you're trying your best to support them. My answer to that would be you are allowed to say, I want to support you in the way that I can. I no longer have the emotional capacity to hold this, and that is okay. You can say that. If that person gets upset, they're allowed to get upset. But you're also allowed to have that boundary. You're allowed to say, hey, I can't actually hear about your active suicides every day. I can't hear about it anymore. It's making me feel nervous. My other best suggestion and what I keep giving is find a way to give them a resource, find the way to give them 988. And I think it's sometimes kind of cheesy when they're like, when someone may be talking to you and expressing how they feel, and you're like, oh, here's 988, here's a resource. But you can always rephrase it and be like, I've talked to crisis counselors to try to figure out a way to support you because I love and care for you. And I've kind of gained that maybe it's helpful to give you directly the resource that, maybe it's helpful for you to talk to them. And I've done that. I've done that all the time because this is something that takes a very long time to learn. But you, as a 16-year-old, me as a 16-year-old, you do not have the tools necessarily to save someone's life because who's being taught that, emotionally, who is being taught that? It's very, 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 very difficult to have that um, boundary. However, there may be something that you say that does save that person's life, and then that's great. But if you're saying that you feel a lot of like emotional baggage from kind of carrying all this weight and stresses you out, you you matter too. This isn't a one-way street. So I would say to kind of um, you know, either find your boundaries first and check yourself and be like, okay, how much can I actually handle? And then you can go on with, should I contact 90 and tell them this is what's going on, see if they can give me any better advice you know, than I can give this person, or should I just tell them that I can no longer hear about it and give them another number? Because also, when you're a teen in high school, and you want to kill yourself, sometimes you go to another person that you feel safe with. And you should feel so good that this person feels safe with you. It's a very good feeling to have that, not to have that like knowledge and to know that this person trusts me. But it is not your responsibility to fix it in any regard. It is your responsibility to find a way to support them if you can. And if you can't, you can be upfront with them. However, that is a very, very, very difficult thing to say. And there is not much else to say to that besides like try to find a way to give them 98 and go from there. But I hear you. I can't even tell you how many teens call and are like, so my friend says she wants to kill herself, but I can't tell anyone, or it's my fault, or I can't tell anyone because she told me not to and we pinky swore. But I don't want to deal with this anymore because I can't sleep anymore because I keep thinking about, her possibly dying in the morning. It's very, 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 very heavy. So I understand that. Before I go to the comments and the question, I mean the comments and the question, the comments, the questions and the comments. Vivian, I know that you had you had a few questions. I don't know if you still want to ask them, but I can do the ones in the chat and then get to yours, but because I know you said that you had a few and I don't want you to feel neglected. So do you mind if I get to these ones in the comment and then come back to you?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Okay, so the first one is any movies or shows that you think would be a good way to introduce the topic into your conversation, with your teen. That's a very, very, very good question. My honest, okay, Daphne, I'm gonna need you to help me out right now. My honest, honest, honest truth is what is that movie where he's a jazz singer and then he dies? And then
Soul.
So
guys, this is why you're here. Soul. That I knew you guys would pull through. Soul. Okay, so it's a Disney or Pixar.
It's
I think
Pixar.
it's Pixar.
Okay, there's a movie
Pixar.
called Soul. It is a Pixar movie about, now y'all are gonna have to correct me, but I'm pretty sure like it's this guy who dies and then he goes into like this like little space and he sees like his purpose and then like something there's like something with his purpose. Whatever. The point of the movie is that it shows you all of these lessons throughout it, but it makes you think about yourself. And I know it's a Disney movie. My only suggestion would be like that is lighthearted enough to not be triggering because I can give you 5 movies right now that show suicide, talk about suicide, give you perfect examples of what suicide looks like, but that's not necessarily productive to have a conversation with a teen. So kind of giving it some lightheartedness or also, and I've done this with people, showing a movie that I know may be comfortable. So for example, if I have a friend who really loves like rom-coms and I show, okay, let me show like 10 things I hate about you. And I find a way throughout the movie, because it's a comfortable movie, it has nothing to do with suicide. I find a way to like pause a movie and start a conversation about something and then bring it up naturally and find a way to like, I know it's kind of like planting the conversation and you're almost spinning a spider web and like making it happen, but you can do that. I don't think that there's a lot of depictions of suicide that accurately talk about it or show what it looks like. I mean, Daphne, please, like, what do you think?
Sorry if I can just interject. I saw this question in the chat, so I had some time to think about it.
Hmm.
Bella and I go to school together, and we're in the same psych program where we've had the opportunity to take some really cool courses that touch on mental health. But for any parents that might be watching this in the future on the call right now, there's a really awesome documentary called The Mask You Live In, and it specifically targets teen boys, which I think that mental health in the male population is a really even more taboo topic. But the documentary, I think, I'm not a parent, but I imagine from a parent perspective might be very interesting and informative to look at. It's free on YouTube and they do a really awesome job. The psychologists in the documentary interview a variety of young teen high schoolers as they go through high school. And it's so interesting. I mean, for me, obviously, like I didn't know what that experience was like because I went to high school and I didn't think, the boys in my class were possibly going through these things. So that documentary is really powerful, understanding why men are usually more depressed and all that kind of thing. And then also, I think that Bella brings up a really good point that sometimes we don't want to throw things at teens specifically. I think just in our education that we've received at our school and learning about these things is that a lot of things can glamorize depression and suicide, especially for teens. So I think the natural, like, oh, watch 13 Reasons Why, like, I remember being in 7th grade and getting a notice to not watch that because it glamorizes suicide and also can be incredibly triggering and is not going to achieve a productive conversation. I did want to bring up a movie that's my personal favorite and just a recommendation for anyone, but I think Little Miss Sunshine is a really lighthearted
Oh, why didn't I think of that?
a
Oh my
lighthearted
God.
Bella and I are that's how we connected and
That's one of my
love for
letterbox too. That's
that
literally
movie.
#1. Why didn't I see
Um, but I think that movie is such an awesome, like, family, lighthearted movie on the surface, but it introduces a lot of really cool topics like self-image, and it has a really, I think, from what we've learned in our psych textbooks at university of what depression looks like through Steve Carell's character. He has a support system, he has people around him checking in, and he still can't help but feel this way. And you really get a look into that. So I'll stop rambling because this is not my presentation, but I just wanted to add that, and I will add those movies and the documentary in the chat. But I think Little Miss Sunshine is especially a good movie to watch with your teen because on the surface, it doesn't appear to be a movie that talks about those things, but it might be one where you can slightly ask, like, hey, but I will add those to the chat right now. Sorry, I didn't mean to go
Oh
into
no, don't apologize, please.
Oh, wait.
When I saw that question too, I was like, oh God, I'm gonna need my best friend to tap in right now. I'm gonna need her to tell me what to do because I don't necessarily know. But again, bringing it up and I say this to every parent all the time on the phone. What is your normal? Is it normal for you to put on a movie and to sit with your child and then to stop the movie and to turn to them and say, are you going to die? Like, are you going to kill yourself? If that's not something that you normally do, find a way to make it normal. If something that's normal is like going to go get fast food together, find a way to bring it up in a normal, comfortable position for that teen. It's very important to do that. That's like my greatest suggestion is what's your normal and to keep that teen comfortable. I also really quickly want to deviate just from the questions for 1 second to add this because I didn't say this and I should have said this, is that parents from the bottom of my heart, seeing a child deal with depression, anxiety, and even suicide is the most like it is so, so hard for you as a parent as well. And although you can feel very dismissed by your teens sometimes or feeling like, you know, like you don't understand what they're going through and you don't know why you don't understand, in no way did you fail as a parent. And in no way are you being any less than you are. Because if you're listening to this right now, if anyone that's watching, and then the people that watch this, if anyone does, that means that you are trying to find a way to support your teen or your child in the ways that you can and you're using your resources. So it is so, so important for you parents to know that you have not failed and you also need to take care of yourself because a lot of parents will call me and they've been up for 36 hours and they have not fallen asleep because they just found cuts on their child's arm and they don't know what to do. And it is very difficult. So I wanted to put that in there because I know, a lot of this is parents and I want them to know that. Okay, anyone? Oh, Vivian, speak your truth. What is your question? I'm ready.
Okay, so how many like calls do you get that are like, are you familiar with the Aubrey Wyatt case?
Wait, I know that name, but give me a second. Let's see.
Is this from TikTok? Because I think I know what you're talking about.
I mean, like, yeah, but like,
Okay, Spark notes it for me because I don't think I know.
like,
Oh my God.
she was like a 13-year-old girl who took her life because of bullying. How many calls do you get from like teens where they're considering taking their life because of bullying and stuff like that?
So a lot of teens that do go through with it are because they're being bullied. I mean, we see that in the media, a lot of people that, and again, a lot of depictions, like we were talking about before, of suicide in movies and TVs is usually a product of bullying. So it's very, 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 very common. And unfortunately, I don't know if you guys were also, if it was just my school, but when I was in my eighth grade health class, we watched that cyberbullying movie. Daphne, I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but it's that like blonde girl and she's like the whatever. And it shows suicide and it was like a cyberbully situation. And obviously we see more and more of that. I mean, I can't even tell you some of the stories that I've heard of people being like blackmailed to kill themselves online. Sorry, I have like a fuzz on my nose. I'm not picking my nose. It is very common and it is very, very disheartening because there is not much that you can do besides support them in that moment and then, just kind of blame the people around. You know what I mean? Blame the bullies, and it's kind of that's the truth.
Also, like, do you think that if like there's like, I don't know, like kind of periods where there's like where they'll mention like being happy and then they're just like all of a sudden back to it?
Yeah. And that can be something that is again a mental health issue, like an actual like diagnosis. We see a lot of mood disorders and people that do go through with suicide, oftentimes, not always, but sometimes do have a mood disorder where they kill themselves in a low low and they don't, that's just what they choose to do. Um, so yeah, it is very prevalent. But again, I think that you have to take a lot of it with like it's so difficult to tell a bunch of teens like put your boundaries up as a 20-year-old because I remember being in that position and I'm still a child, like I'm still a kid. But you can only hold so much and deal with so much. And having someone that's suicidal it's very draining for them and it's also very, very, very taxing for you. So it's very normal to see the up and down of people's emotions and it can be very confusing too for people.
Also, last question. Um, like, why, if people are so, if like that mom, for example, why, if she was so adamant that she was going to go through with her plan, and she was going to do it right after the call, why would she still make the call?
It's a very good question. We have people call for a plethora of reasons. I've had active suicides, and it's like, wait, why are you calling? And the best way to put it is sometimes people, for either, there's two reasons. Sometimes people just want to hear one more voice before they go. And I mean, it makes me emotional, like even thinking about it. Like sometimes that is really just what the case is. And oftentimes, and majority of the time, people really want someone to show them that they care. I mean, a lot of teens I hear this a lot, and I think that maybe some of you have also heard this, of like a kid saying, I called 5 friends, and if one of them picks up, I won't do it. I'm not going to do it if one picks up. And sometimes none of them pick up, and people do attempt suicide, and it's very scary. So, I think it's hard to say why someone may call, but most of the time, and I feel like almost all the time, I can confirm that it's usually because they do want to stay alive. Sometimes you just need to be reminded of that. When you're going to kill yourself, your brain is fogged. Not oh, I'm not saying it's fogged like, oh, you're like crazy, but your brain is overwhelmed and you're probably being shot with all of these things that are just difficult to metabolize and like separate. So, I'm not necessarily sure in that woman's case, but I've had people call me when there was active suicides, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, there's a person on the other line right now that is could do something to themselves right now, and I'm over here. Like, how do I navigate that? And it's very difficult, but I mean, again, we only hear what the caller wants to tell us, so it can be very difficult sometimes. My question in the comment is, do you see a connection? But thank you for your questions, Vivian. Those are very good. Do you see a connection between social media and mental health? 125%. Like I was saying, it is that phone. It's very annoying to hear parents say it's social media, it's the phone that's doing it. I mean, teens have more noise. Teens have more noise. Teens have more access to things. I want you to think about Reddit. I want you to think about the dark web. Think about deep, deep, deep scrolls on Instagram and where that brings you. TikTok. We have seen a drastic rise in eating disorders since social media has drastic, drastic. There are accounts that show you what to do. And you see the same thing for suicide and the same thing for depression. I can confidently say, as a non-clinician, I do not have a degree, that there is 100% a connection between the two of them, which is why it is so, so, so harmful for 988 not to be a thing. So harmful. In a world where everything is digital, and the idea of 988 possibly not existing, you are putting thousands and thousands of teens at risk. Thousands of teens at risk when they are already at risk. So, yes, there is a connection, but it's no one's fault. There's just more noise and there's more things for teens to deal with. Not saying that there was less things for past generations to deal with when they were a teenager. But again, teens now just admittedly have more access to harmful content, which is 100% true. And I could talk about that for hours. Just the how absolutely harmful some things on social media are, like truly to the bottom of my heart. Which is why, there are support systems like 98 and like Teen Line and, like mental health clubs in high school that are in place to help teens.
Okay.
I had one very, 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 very,
Go
very
for it,
quick thing.
Margot.
So while you guys were stop it. While you guys were te texting, Jesus Christ. While you guys were like talking about the movies and stuff, it kind of reminded me of something that I wanted to say earlier, but then I didn't. Um My favorite book of all time is a book that is quite relatable. Don't look at me like that, Vivian. And it kind of does reflect mental health in a way.
Catcher in the Rye!
It's Catcher in the Rye. It's such a good book. So you should read it because it kind of shows the perspective of somebody who does feel like they want to, that they're kind of suicidal and they feel like they, they don't really have a purpose, and then like they eventually find something that makes them happy. It's a really good book. I was like, I don't want to read this for school, and then I read it, I'm like, oh, and then it makes me cry. So yeah. Totally off topic kind of, but
No,
still.
great suggestion. I'm a fan, so
I
I
am
got no
too.
complaints.
But yeah, this essentially wraps up our evening. I want to thank Bella one more time. I also want to take a moment to congratulate the interns. Today was their last day. I had so much fun supervising them. I'm sad to see them leave. I go back to the office on Monday and I won't see their faces. So they did such a good job and I couldn't be more proud of them. And I really want to thank the parents too for joining. Like Bella said, I think this is just such a huge thing to do for your teen, or a friend or whoever, for whatever reason you're joining. I just want to thank you for that. And I'm also going to put Bella's presentation in the chat. So if anyone wants to take a moment to download that for future resources, that'll be there. I also wanted to say, last thing is that Bella probably mentioned this, but I know you teens from my own experience in my days in high school, it's not easy and it might not be depression with what you're dealing with or suicide, but it might be other things like Bella mentioned, um, eating disorders or anxiety or things like that. And the text lines are still available to you, or the call lines are still available to you for those reasons. So if you need resources for any of those things, or if you need resources for your teen for any of those things, the hotlines will have those for you. So yeah, I just wanted to add that in, but I also just wanted to thank Bella again. I will have this recorded and I will ask Supervisor Feiner to upload this to the town website. So if you want to send this to somebody else or if you want to go back and review anything, it'll be here. But yeah, thank you all so much. I hope everyone has a great weekend and yeah, thank you,
Thank you
everybody.
guys so
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
listening. Have a nice
Bye.
Bye-bye.